Ukraine is preparing for the next mobile phase of this campaign. Their counteroffensive that started back in September is still happening, but we've been in a lull, of course, because of they had to adjust to Russia's infusion of untrained mobics and people in intensive fighting up in the northeastern part of Ukraine. But they also needed to train and prepare for this next offensive phase. And so I think what we're seeing and what I would predict is that probably within the next month, Ukraine is going to launch an attack in the direction of Mariupol. And the purpose of all of this is to sever the connections between Crimea and Russia. Crimea is the decisive ground here. That's what matters the most. Ukrainian General Staff knows this. And I think they see now that they can hold pretty much, they can stop a Russian breakthrough up in the northeastern region. They have to be prepared or alert to the possibility of a new Russian offensive coming out of the north or out of Belarus, but I think those are unlikely. So what they've done, which requires real nerves of steel, is resist the urge to push every new piece of equipment, every new weapon, every new unit into the meat grinder and hold with what they've got so that they can build up, train an armored force that will be able to change, regain the momentum on the ground. And the last piece of this is the importance of long-range precision weapons. There's so much talk about tanks right now, and that is important. That will be important for this armored formation that I talked about. But there are only two land lines of communication that connect Crimea to Russia. One is the Kerch Bridge. The other is the so-called land bridge that runs from Rostov through Mariupol and Melitopol. They've already hit Kerch Bridge, and I'm sure they'll hit it again. They'll want to prevent Russia from repairing it. The land bridge has already been hit, vicinity Melitopol. So if the West were to provide more long-range precision weapons, then Ukraine could already be disrupting both LOCs. And the goal of the land force and those air-delivered capabilities that I just mentioned is to isolate Crimea. Crimea starts looking more and more like a trap. And eventually, it becomes untenable for Russian forces, and they're compelled to leave. I think that can happen by the end of the summer. Many in the West, including even in the Pentagon, are still looking at the idea that, are having a hard time grasping the idea that big Russia could actually be defeated. Okay, that's part of it. The second part is I think most of their estimations think only in sort of linear terms of, having to fight through all these trenches and Russian defenses in the southern part of Ukraine, or that somehow Ukraine has to attack along the entire front. They don't. I mean, this is the importance of identifying what is decisive. And what is decisive is Crimea. Ukraine will never be safe, secure, or able to rebuild its economy as long as Russia sits on Crimea. So that's why I think that the Ukrainians, if they are able to isolate Crimea through long-range fires and through ground attack and through making the Russian rear area a pure hell for logisticians and headquarters and truck drivers, then they will be in a position where they can bring up enough HIMARS and other long-range systems to hit Sevastopol, Shankoy, Saki, all those very vulnerable facilities and locations on the Crimean Peninsula so that it becomes untenable. The Russians can't stay there. The key, of course, and the vulnerability of my assessment is that it does depend on continued Western support and the eventual delivery of precision weapons. I'm talking about ATACMS, small diameter bombs, the kind of things that can reach beyond what the GMLRS does right now. One of the things that I overestimated before last February was the size of actual Russian forces. They didn't have as many people already in uniform as they had said and as we thought. And the other thing, I overestimated their mobilization system. what has been exposed. And this was first brought to my attention by a retired Finnish general who, would understand this better than most. He said that, there was so much corruption that they don't have the equipment. What they do have is not properly prepared. They don't, all the things that go into mobilization requires accountability and preparation. None of that has existed. So that's why we have all been watching videos over the last several months of these extremely unhappy people, the ones who were not clever enough to get out of Russia back in September, being handed old rusty equipment, improper uniforms, poor quality body armor, and of course they are constantly exposed to bad weather. They're not properly trained or led. So the first mobilization back in September was a total cluster, and yet it still did provide tens of thousands of bodies that could be used literally as cannon fodder. And that's what we saw around Soledar and Bakhmut, that they're willing to suffer hundreds of casualties every day because they don't care about, what they're losing. That did have an effect, obviously. I mean, the Ukrainian soldiers still had to kill them. But what the Russians have done up around Soledar and Bakhmut is not the kind of thing that's going to represent a major breakthrough. I mean, they have no forces they can exploit. Like they somehow penetrated Ukrainian defenses, and now they can, drive on towards Kyiv or Kharkiv, or, there's nothing there. And I have not seen, of course I could be totally wrong, but I have not seen evidence that they have fixed all their problems in the mobilization system. And now they're going to add another 100, 200, 500,000, whatever the number is, to this burden of feed, equip, accommodate, move. Who are the sergeants that are training these soldiers? Who are the officers that are going to lead their formation? I mean, all of these kind of things, it'll be a threat, but it's not the kind of thing that's going to, I think, change the outcome of the war. And the Ukrainian General Staff, I think, knows that. They have seen that.